I will admit that when this story first came to light a few months ago, I dismissed it. Some boffin at the Royal Institute of British Architects had proposed a moratorium on all demolition to safeguard what is known as embodied carbon. Embodied carbon is basically the carbon emitted when building materials are actually made. Fast forward a few months, however, and this is a story that is just not going away. In fact, it's gaining traction, and rather than being seen as a crackpot idea, it is potentially being used to drive political thinking and possibly even legislation. Now, the UK government is reportedly in the final stages of creating its new heat and building strategy. But Business Minister Lord Callanan says that embodied carbon was one of the areas under consideration. According to United Nations statistics, making steel, concrete and bricks creates a lot of carbon emissions. Concrete alone contributes around 8% of global emissions. And the engineering giant Arup calculated around half of the whole life emissions of a building could come from the carbon emitted during its construction and its demolition. The chairman of the government's Advisory Climate Change Committee, Lord Deben, said, "We need to think differently. It's not acceptable to pull buildings down like this. We have to learn to make do and mend." Lord Deben went on to say there needs to be a new planning law to stop giving permission for demolition, adding, "We are simply not going to win the battle against climate change unless we fight on every front." Climate experts are now urging ministers to make it hard for developers to demolish buildings without first exploring ways to refurbish and extend them. Should the demolition industry be worried? Yeah, I believe it should. There's a global move towards addressing the impending climate crisis. In just a few weeks' time, Glasgow will host the COP26 Climate Change Conference. Governments, the UK included, could be looking for some headline-grabbing quick wins. And being entirely honest, UK politicians will be well aware that the next general election will be upon us in just a few years. The stewardship of the environment could yet prove to be the key political battleground, particularly for those looking to secure the notoriously green youth vote. Against that background, demolition companies should be very worried indeed about any political moves to address the embodied carbon issue. And reaching out to the various media outlets reporting on this issue will not cut it. It's too late by then. The demolition industry needs to engage instead with politicians and scientists if it is to fend off this very serious threat. And it needs to align itself with the biggest names in construction, not as their whipping boy, but as equals, because their livelihoods are equally under threat. If it doesn't, the demolition and construction industry could be negatively and hugely impacted.